Alright guys, we gotta talk about what's going on in New York City because so far things are getting pretty wild because it seems like a lot of migrants are leaving New York City, many of them are also being deported, but it seems like New York City is finally kind of done with the migrant crisis. The reason why I say kind of is they're still doing it, they're still spending billions of dollars. At the very least, there seems to be a massive change going on in New York City. I think New York is starting to notice that they can't keep doing this migrant crisis situation. It's unsustainable when you're spending $6 billion in 2 years. So if you look at Texas, almost 5,000 are going there. Almost 5,000 is going to Illinois. 4,000 is going to like New York upstates. And they also have like 5 to 6,000 go to places like Florida and Colorado. And New York City has housed approximately 250,000 migrants since the inflow began a couple years ago. And they spent $6 to $7 billion. It's probably going to be hitting $10 billion very soon. And for one of the richest cities in the world and probably the richest city in America, New York City, they have money. They're pretty wealthy, but even they have trouble paying all this crazy cost. There's even a toll to go to Manhattan now. What in the world is going on in New York City? Seems like the city is going broke. But right now, people are seeing that 20,000 migrants are leaving New York City. And even Mayor Eric Adams, who initially was like a big advocate for the sanctuary city, is saying that ordinary people don't care about Hitler, whatever, and a democracy, whatever. They're not really talking about all this stuff. What Eric Adams says is most New Yorkers are talking about stuff that actually matters. For example, housing, the migrant crisis, where are my taxes going to? Nobody really wants to hear ideologies every single day. I think people in New York are sick and tired of the migrant crisis. This is another reason why places like Pennsylvania became so incredibly red during the election. This is why New York City and also places in California are being redder than ever before. A bunch of these guys are going Republican for a reason. A bunch of people are going more right for a reason because they feel like all this stuff should have never even happened in the first place, like New York City's migrant crisis. Why is there a crisis? Well, it's pretty simple. You took in like 250,000 people. Of course, your public services are going to collapse. Of course, migrants are going to be sleeping on the streets, which is also breeding a lot of migrant gangs, for example. Now, Texas is stepping up further, offering thousands of acres to Trump for deportation facilities. And as you can see in a lot of these Twitter videos, Eric Adams' tone about the migrant crisis has suddenly changed 180. He's even seen shaking hands with Donald Trump in the most recent Twitter video. I think it was like a boxing match or something, and they met up. But you get the idea. There is a lot of change happening in New York City ever since Trump got elected. We're seeing a lot of states which are traditionally very blue turn red. And now we have Texas going all out. For deportation facilities, many of these cities, from Denver to Chicago to New York City, are starting to notice playing the sanctuary city card is expensive and it doesn't really get you anywhere as a city. Not to mention, when you take in that many people, of course your city is going to collapse. Now, because New York City is doing such a bad job on the migrant crisis, now you got a bunch of migrant gangs popping up. This is also what happens when you take in way too many people and you can't take care of them. Many of them are left on the streets, many of them don't get food, and basically just neglect. And when neglect happens, guess what happens? Shelters will eventually start forming gangs. And here you go. There's even a gang in New York City that's teenage years. They're under 18 years old, and the NYPD can't even arrest these guys. And because they're young, they could do all sorts of very violent crimes, from stealing to theft to straight up robbery, and they get away with it. They just get right off on the streets. And the really wild part is NYPD has arrested these guys over 500 times, and they still get let out. And you could clearly yourselves watch some of these interviews. It's honestly kind of wild how much power they have over the NYPD and the city. In New York City right now, they're trying to reverse the course of the migrant crisis, but even they are having a very difficult time because the original, policy and the laws makes it for New York City to have a very hard time to change. But right now, New York City is seeking 14,000 hotel rooms for migrants throughout 2025, which is next year. And it's going to cost New York City next year $2.3 billion. $352 per night And the only winners out of this is going to be the hotel industry. A lot of hotels in New York City, from small, medium to large, have converted themselves into migrant shelters. Over 100 of them have done so. Right now, New York City is understanding that they can't seem to constantly pay this enormous price tag. And this was the reason why Eric Adams seems to be suddenly have a massive change in his position of a sanctuary city. But at the current moment, it seems like migrants are leaving New York City. Some of the migrants are being shipped to Canada. Many of them are being relocated to places like New York Upstate. Let's see what happens next with the migrant crisis in New York City.